there exists a resonance, an inner frequency that certain individuals hold. It's not something you can easily pin down with a label or teach in a workshop. It often goes unnoticed in a society that prefers to categorize and manage what it encounters. You might sense it in the subtle change in atmosphere when someone walks into a space, not because they've made a grand entrance, but because an unspoken, authentic presence seems to stir something in those who are not yet fully awake to their own potential. The pioneering psychologist Carl Jung spoke of psychic energy as a vital, living force. He suggested this energy doesn't come from forced positivity or ignoring our difficulties, but from a profound inner union, the integration of our shadow and our light. This resonance isn't about being superior or more spiritually advanced. It's about embodying a genuine truth in a world that often values the facade. What we're going to explore are three distinct markers that tend to emerge in individuals, particularly women, who have navigated the transformative fires of self-discovery and emerged with a quality that the wider world sometimes struggles to embrace. These aren't traits designed to win popularity or easy understanding. They are signs of an inner architecture so congruent with personal truth that it naturally reflects the unaddressed issues in others. And here's a thought that might resonate. You may already recognize all three within yourself, and that might explain a feeling of solitude you can't quite shake. This isn't a manual on how to become high-vibrational. It's an acknowledgement of what may already reside within you, waiting for recognition. By the end of our time together, you may find clarity on why your quietness can be unsettling to some, why your alone time feels like a source of strength, and why you've moved beyond the impulse to rescue others, or even a former version of yourself. Let's start by looking at a concept that can be challenging to confront: the profound impact of a silent, authentic presence. Before we dive deeper, if this exploration of inner truth speaks to you, consider subscribing to the channel. Your support helps bring these conversations to light. Now, let's continue. Jung's concept of individuation points toward a journey the feminine spirit has intuitively understood, but hasn't always been free to fully express. It's the process of distinguishing your core essence from the parts you play for others, the identities placed upon you, and the expectations that can constrain your true nature. For many women, this journey carries extra weight. There is often conditioning to be the relational glue, to hold space, to nurture, to remain soft, open, and perpetually available. The individual who operates from this place of deep authenticity does something that can feel surprisingly radical in its simplicity. She pauses. She stops over-explaining herself to those committed to misunderstanding. She ceases to justify her boundaries to people who interpret self-care as selfishness. She disengages from performing the role of the eternally accommodating woman, the patient therapist friend, the emotional safety net for those unwilling to engage in their own inner work. This isn't an act of cruelty. It is, perhaps, the first sign, the conscious choice of solitude as a pathway back to the self. It's crucial to distinguish between isolation born from pain and solitude chosen from a place of inner authority. Isolation often springs from fear, the fear that connection will lead to hurt, based on past experiences where vulnerability was met with betrayal. But the individual drawing from this deep, authentic resonance withdraws for a different reason. She has cultivated the discernment to recognize relationships that nourish her essence from those that primarily deplete it. She feels no overwhelming duty to explain this discernment. She doesn't justify her absence from environments that require her to diminish herself. She simply steps back, often without drama. And in that stepping back, she reclaims something sacred. Jung understood that the individuated self requires a degree of separation from the collective unconscious, from the shared narratives and assumptions that keep many operating on autopilot. For women, this separation can look like a conscious refusal to participate in certain unspoken agreements of conventional femininity. She likely won't use gossip to manufacture false closeness. She probably doesn't engage in competition with other women for attention or approval. She resists contorting herself into shapes that betray her inner knowing just to fit into groups that never truly acknowledged her authenticity. This withdrawal isn't antisocial. It's the psyche safeguarding its own integrity. I'm curious, does this idea of chosen solitude versus lonely isolation hit home for you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's build a community of shared understanding. This conscious retreat creates space. In the quiet, away from the static of social performance, she can reconnect with deeper currents, her own intuition, perhaps even ancestral whispers of wisdom. You may have noticed your own circle becoming more intimate, friendships that once felt vital now seeming hollow, family events leaving you drained not from overt conflict, but from the energy required to pretend you still fit into an old, assigned role. This isn't a failure to connect. It's a shedding of inauthentic belonging. And in that shedding, you might discover something profound. You are more truly yourself in solitude than you ever were in crowds that demanded your compromise. But this chosen solitude holds a paradox. The world often misinterprets your withdrawal as arrogance, coldness, or a rejection of community itself. Individuals who haven't examined their own participation in unhealthy dynamics may label you as judgmental, difficult, too intense, or not sufficiently engaged. They may ask why you've changed, as if your growth is a personal affront to their stagnation. This brings us to the second sign, one that reveals how deeply your authentic presence can affect your environment: the silence that creates ripples. In this context, silence isn't merely the absence of speech. It's the presence of a self so integrated that words become a choice, not a compulsion. The woman who has faced her own shadows and chosen awareness over complacency no longer feels the need to fill every empty space with conversation. She doesn't over-explain her decisions to those who lack the framework to understand them. She doesn't defend her life choices to people who are still confined by the opinions of others. Her silence isn't withholding. It is a state of fullness. And this fullness can be unsettling to others because in the space where she refuses to speak, they are confronted with their own internal noise. Her calm demeanor becomes a mirror, reflecting back the chaos they carry within. Jung wrote about projection, our unconscious tendency to attribute to others the qualities we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. The individual living from this deep resonance becomes an involuntary screen onto which the unhealed may project their fear, envy, or unexamined frustration. She may say little, do nothing provocative, and yet her mere existence elicits a reaction. This is why she is sometimes called cold when she is simply clear, labeled distant when she is respectfully boundaried, accused of superiority when she has merely stopped performing insecurity to put others at ease. Her silence is not a rejection of meaningful connection. It is a refusal to participate in the counterfeit intimacy that often passes for relationship. She likely won't bond primarily over shared complaints. She won't build closeness through a sense of collective victimhood. She doesn't use words to manipulate, control, or secure a spot in a social hierarchy. Instead, she listens. She observes. She allows space for genuine reality to emerge without forcing it. In a culture addicted to noise, distraction, and constant chatter that prevents true self-encounter, her silence can feel like an unspoken critique. It inadvertently highlights the emptiness of circular conversations, the performative nature of many social interactions, the underlying thirst for validation driving much of human behavior. She doesn't intend this exposure. It simply happens because she has stopped participating in the collective agreement to avoid uncomfortable truths. If you're finding value in this deep dive into authentic presence, please give this video a like. It lets me know this content is resonating with you. Now, let's move to the third and perhaps most liberating sign. This leads us to the third marker, one that brings profound freedom alongside a unique form of solitude: the release of the save or be saved paradigm. Jungian psychology explores archetypal dynamics, like the core mother-daughter relationship, which can manifest as a cycle of nurturing and dependency. Think of the myth of Demeter and Persephone, a mother's grief so profound it alters the world until her daughter returns. This dynamic plays out in many lives: the parent living through a child, the adult still seeking parental approval, the endless cycle of rescue and dependency disguised as love. The woman rooted in her authentic frequency has stepped out of this cycle. She no longer assumes responsibility for the emotional well-being of capable adults, not from a lack of compassion, but from a profound understanding that true compassion does not mean taking on work that belongs to another soul's journey. She will not save her partner from his own introspection. She will not rescue her children from every necessary struggle. She will not carry the unprocessed grief of her parents, friends, or community. This isn't coldness. It is a degree of psychological maturity that is so robust it can seem unconventional. Similarly, she does not wait to be saved. She doesn't seek an authority figure to grant her permission to exist fully. She doesn't look for a guru, a partner, or a teacher to finally see her worth and reflect it back. She has done the work to integrate what Jung termed the anima and animus, the inner feminine and masculine energies, allowing her to access both receptive and assertive strengths without depending on an external person to provide what she can cultivate within. She becomes her own source of inner authority and validation. This integration doesn't make her invulnerable, it makes her honest. She knows her limits. She can ask for help from a place of clarity, not desperation. She doesn't collapse into helplessness to manipulate care from others, nor does she perform a brittle hyperindependence to prove she needs no one. She exists in the truth of each moment, able to receive support without becoming dependent, and to offer support without losing herself. The world can find this deeply unsettling. If she can allow loved ones to walk their own paths, if she can witness someone she cares about make difficult choices without intervening to fix it, if she can hold space for suffering without rushing to erase it, then many unspoken relationship contracts begin to dissolve. The contract that says love requires constant sacrifice. The contract that says caring means controlling. The contract that insists, if you loved me, you'd prevent my pain. She doesn't break these contracts through loud rebellion, but through quiet, embodied knowing. She has learned, often through her own trials, that you cannot do another person's inner work for them. That genuine transformation is an inside job. That sometimes the most loving act is to step back and allow the natural consequences of choices to unfold, even when it's painful to watch. This is the wisdom of non-invasion, an archetypal understanding that each soul has its own path to wholeness. This is a profound shift. Has there been a time in your life when you realized you had to stop trying to save someone or stop waiting to be saved? I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments. People may leave her life. Some depart angrily because she won't engage in the dramatic cycles they rely on. Others drift away, unable to tolerate the quiet accountability her presence implies. Some may return years later, having done their own work, finally able to meet her where she stands. She allows these movements. She doesn't chase, punish, or hold grudges. She continues her path, trusting that relationships aligned with her authenticity will match her frequency when the timing is right, understanding that forced connections often lead to more suffering. But let's be careful not to idealize this position. The individual living from this deep resonance is not a perfected being floating above human complexity. She has a shadow, too. There is a subtle temptation that accompanies this level of self-awareness, a risk of spiritual arrogance, a whisper that she has figured out something others haven't. This is the shadow of integration, the danger of using spiritual or psychological concepts as a shield against genuine vulnerability. She must remain vigilant against identifying as the wise one or the awakened one, as this is often the ego adopting a more sophisticated costume. Jung consistently warned about the perils of identifying with an archetype rather than integrating its lessons. True resonance doesn't exempt her from anger, envy, weariness, or doubt. It doesn't mean she never feels the sting of loneliness or the ache of being misunderstood. What it means is that she no longer abandons herself when these difficult feelings surface. She doesn't repress them in the name of false positivity. She allows the full spectrum of her humanity to exist, treating each emotion as valuable information rather than as a sign of failure. This is the real work, not ascending above the human experience, but descending fully into it with consciousness. Not becoming so spiritual, you disconnect from life, but becoming so grounded you can hold life's complexities within you without fragmenting. The paradox is that the more integrated she becomes, the more she may be perceived as detached or unfeeling by those who equate love with high emotional reactivity. Because she won't mirror their chaos back to them, they might assume she feels nothing. In truth, she likely feels deeply. She has simply learned not to be overwhelmed by her own depths. There is a unique loneliness that comes with this territory, one that can't be solved simply by finding a community or partner. It's the solitude of living from a place of awareness that fewer people inhabit, of seeing through illusions many still hold as reality, of being unable to return to unconsciousness once you've tasted authentic awareness. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow what you've integrated. So you walk a path that few may understand, that receives little external celebration, a path that may look like isolation from the outside, but feels like the only honest way to live from the inside. If this conversation about the invisible journey of transformation is helpful, please consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it today. This brings us to a point seldom discussed: the invisibility of genuine, deep transformation. When an individual undergoes profound individuation, integrates her shadow, and aligns with her authentic self, there is rarely external applause or recognition. The people who knew her before may not understand who she has become. The people who would recognize her now may not have crossed her path yet. She exists in an in-between space, a threshold. The collective often rewards the performance of healing more than the actual, private work of healing. The person who shares curated glimpses of a journey on social media may receive attention. The person who does the quiet, daily work of integration may remain unseen. The individual who speaks the language of transformation without fully embodying it may find a crowd. The one who embodies it without needing to proclaim it may find solitude. This isn't a critique. It's an observation of how consciousness often operates in a world not fully oriented toward depth. She may stop telling her story, not because it lacks value, but because she no longer requires witnesses to validate its truth. She stops seeking recognition for her growth, understanding that real evolution is an internal process that reshapes the psyche in ways you can't capture in a post or a photo. Her revolution is quiet. Her transformation happens in the unseen moments, in the choices made when no one is watching, in the steady, private commitment to truth that needs no audience. This invisibility can feel like a kind of death, because in a culture that often confuses visibility with value, to be unseen can feel like not existing. But she learns a different metric. She senses her worth through the quality of her own presence, not through the gaze of others. She feels her growth in the increasing simplicity of her inner world, in the decreasing need for external drama, in the expanding capacity to hold life's paradoxes without collapsing into one extreme or the other. And yet, the world may interpret her quietude as failure. They may say she has given up, grown bitter, or lost her spark. They likely won't see that what they called a spark was sometimes a performance. What they call giving up was actually letting go. What they call bitterness was often clarity. She eventually stops arguing with these misinterpretations. She stops defending her choices to those determined to misunderstand. She learns that you cannot be truly seen by someone who is only looking for a reflection of who you used to be. So, what remains when the need to perform, explain, belong, and be understood falls away? What is left when the individual aligns with this deep, authentic resonance? We arrive at the essence, what Jung might call the self in its most fundamental expression. What remains is simplicity, not a simple-mindedness, but the elegant simplicity of a psyche no longer divided against itself. She returns her attention to the basic elements of existence: the warmth of sunlight, the clean taste of water, the rhythm of her own breath. She notices the ordinary with a focus most people reserve for the spectacular, because she has discovered that the extraordinary was always woven into the fabric of the ordinary, waiting for a mindful gaze. This isn't a superficial practice of gratitude. It is the lived experience of someone who has faced her own depths and emerged with a reverence for life that doesn't require life to be anything other than what it is in each moment. Her resonance, this quality that may have caused disruption, misunderstanding, and solitude, was not something she manufactured. It is what remained when she stopped trying to be anything other than authentically, undeniably real. It is the natural frequency of a soul in alignment with its own truth, unfiltered by the craving for approval, undimmed by the fear of rejection, uncomplicated by the performance of a persona. This has been a deep exploration of the inner landscape. If it resonated with you, if it put words to feelings you've had, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more content that seeks to explore the unseen dimensions of our lives. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for being part of this community of exploration.